beautiful divine Christar family. Today we are going to have a really fun deep dive through this cosmic library exploration, really wanting to look at the different perspectives or the multiple Jesus. So when we look at the Voyagers materials, we have Yeshua or Jeshua 12, we have the Jeshua 9, and then there was the other character that came into play. We're really going to be focusing on J12 and J9, looking a little bit more into this. We're going to dive into this through some of the womb chakra perspective and allow it to open up some doorways for us to start to question, who are these seven sages, the Septarishis, septa meaning seven. So these seven rishis. And as we get to look at this in a little bit of a different perspective, maybe looking at it from many different types of texts and different angles, we're going to get to see, that Jesus was here as an emissary in the way that he was, because he was really co-partnering within this incarnation through the body of Mary. So we're going to dive in a little bit to the energy of Mary, Mother Mary, and that's going to take us on a fun journey as well, hopefully, as we deep dive into this. And as we look at the Septarishis as well, I want to tie this in to our understanding as we look at this of the world, the realms, the dimensions, or the dreams that we live in. And primarily within the womb chakra, something that's presented to us in a beautiful way is the Gayatri mantra. The Gayatri mantra is a really powerful mantra that helps us to really pull in vibrations from higher dimensional planes and to be able to anchor them in. And we're going to kind of look at this story and a little bit of a deeper meaning as to why the Gayatri mantra, I feel, is so special, why Sri Kaleshwar really shared the story over and over. And I'm going to do my best to tell a portion or a version of his story, just so that we can have maybe another viewpoint of dimensions and realities. So within this, it's a lot of moving parts, but I feel we're going to see them all tied together in a really beautiful way. So let's go ahead and dive in. And what I want to do as I share this information is to really bounce it off of a book called The Divine Mission by Sri Kaleshwar. So within here we have this beautiful book, and the book itself is Ancient Knowledge and Mission Rendering Teachings from Sri Kaleshwar. It's a really beautiful book. I'll actually dive up to the top here so you guys can see it says Ancient Knowledge, Divine Mission. A really, really beautiful book that is basically just a rendering of some of his teachings that he shared. And we're only going to be really looking at one page within here, and that is going to be page 8. And we're going to play with this page and let it launch us into a whole lot of different contemplation and introspection. I invite, as we go through this, that I'm not attempting to tell you any points of view, but really that we can use this library time together as a way to explore and hopefully have more questions about things, so that we can start to dig a lot deeper into our Akashic libraries as we're bringing our true galactic history back online. So I'm going to start here with this portion, the Divine Mission. The history of human life and civilization is far older and greater than today's understanding of science has yet discovered. In a time very long ago, early in humans' existence on this planet, life and people were very different from today. That time was called the Satya Yuga, the age of truth and enlightenment. The men and women of that time were rishis, enlightened beings with Siddhic powers. So I want to highlight that, you guys, because this is really key to understand that we haven't always been in the dark ages. There have been Satya Yugas, or ages of truth and enlightenment, where basically all the women and men at that time were rishis incarnate. Well, who are the rishis again? From the Voyagers or from the Kilanta perspective, that's fifth harmonic universe. So as we look at this, that's solar beings coming in full enlightenment with full Siddhic powers. Siddhic powers is basically the ability to do pure manifestation. It's magical abilities, if you will. So it's saying here the men and women of that time were rishis. They were enlightened beings with Siddhic power. They were more wondrous than we can conceive. They were a perfect expression of humanity's divine nature. People lived for tens of thousands of years and dedicated their lives to the welfare of society. They saw all living and non living beings as expressions of God consciousness. They understood the reality of human incarnation as divine. Every life is an embodiment of the consciousness of God. The primacy of the feminine aspect of God, the Divine Mother, was understood by all. God is both mother and father, feminine and masculine. They worshiped the Divine Mother as the force behind all creation and revered nature as the sublime expression of the Mother God. They recognized all of nature as a manifestation of Mother. Nature was their teacher. They discovered the secrets hidden in nature and learned the mysteries of creation. They dedicated their lives to meditating and connecting to God as Mother, who revealed everything to them. This paragraph alone really depicts really the true underlining energies of, say, even the Star Nation race of the Alpha Centaurians and a lot of the higher dimensional planes and evolved beings that exist. And, in the story of the Alpha Centaurians, they've actually learned how to create all of their spacecraft, all of their technologies, all of the ways in which they function, their advanced civilizations, by having studied nature and by working within the physics and the laws of nature. Then they have learned the energy mechanics of that planetary body. And then they basically can create the free energy and all the different things. So when we connect to nature, there is one aspect of it that we might think of as very shamanistic, as connecting to the base elementals of nature, which is a key place to start with. But truly within nature, you learn the divine cosmic energy of all. And one of the beautiful things about it is that it takes us beyond. It doesn't mean that we just go back to sitting on the earth and just being with the earth, but that we can create magnificent things, actually organic technologies, things that are very bio-friendly to our planet and has consciousness when we learn to create through the cosmic mother in this way. So I wanted to kind of touch on this because it's saying it in here very lightly, but in this time of the Satya Yuga, these rishis were spending their time dedicating it to the advancement of the welfare of society. So this is probably just beautiful architecture, beautiful consciousness, beautiful just expansion in so many ways. Now, let's dive right in here. The Divine Mother said one body of knowledge would be especially important to enlighten humankind at the end of our current age, which is the Kali Yuga. She foretold it would be the knowledge humankind needed to bring an era of truth and enlightenment. The Divine Mother instructed these ancient rishis to carefully protect and preserve this knowledge for humanity's time of need. This knowledge was passed on orally, then later written down on palm leaf manuscripts. Over the eons that followed, these manuscripts were hidden and protected, and when the passage of time made it necessary, they were copied onto new palm leaves. Copying them protected and preserved them. As the progression of ages unfolded and humanity's fall from divine qualities progressed, the knowledge was held only by a few. Now, through the Divine Mother's grace, this knowledge has been revealed to the world for the first time through Sri Kalishwar. So it's going to talk a little bit about his story here. In 1997, Sri Kalishwar introduced these ancient practices. So to know, he was actually born in, I believe it was 1972. He transitioned out of body in 2012. So he left in 2012. In 1997, as he was young, it was when he actually he started to find these palm leaf scripts and began to teach them. And so they're saying in 1997, he introduced these ancient practices when he taught the 5 elements process for the first time in America. He shared the practices from the palm leaves that Jesus had done, practices rishis themselves used to awaken yogic powers and divine consciousness. For example, the Septarishis channels, the holy womb chakra, discovered by Vishwamitra Maharishi 7,000 years ago, and the Pantajali Shakti, discovered by Biguru Maharishi. Now, I'm going to pause right here for just a moment because this is where we're going to come back and we're going to look. You can see on the side here, we're talking about Vishwamitra Maharishi. This is going to be a key energy. So Vishwamitra Maharishi, 7,000 years ago, and I apologize if I mix up the name every once in a while, was one of the Septarishis. Now, his story is going to be unique, and I will dive into it towards the end of our presentation today. But the thing that is very significant about this individual and for us to recognize is Sri Kaleshwar, again, incarnated at a time where his primary directive was to find buried or hidden. They were buried, and he was directed through premonition where to unbury these palm leaf manuscripts that had been buried away. I think he had a range of them that were buried between, I think, 3,000 to 7,000 years in age. There was a variation in the different ones. Some of the oldest ones were 7,000 years old, and these were dated in order to get that verification for them. So he came into this lifetime with a specific purpose. It was known that Sri Kaleshwar, I believe, is one of these Septarishis. And so let's kind of look at this because Vishwamitra was said to have been one of the main individuals that actually wrote these out on the palm leaf manuscripts in one of his incarnational cycles. And when he wrote these out, these were the very same teachings that were used by Yeshua or Jesus. So these were the very channels and the very energies for creating miracles, for creating manifestation within this reality, and learning how to use the energy channels of this world, this dimension, in order to manifest. Well, what's so interesting about Vishwamitra is we're going to look at his story is he's not only responsible for these palm leaves that were the very main teachings that Jesus learned when he went to India, but he also is the writer and the creator of the Gayatri mantra. And the Gayatri mantra, we're going to see, is very, very important because it helps us transcend whole worlds and actually bypass massive levels of karma within this reality. So we will highlight this individual. I wanted to just highlight this because this is highlighting not only how important the Gayatri mantra is, but also this holy womb chakra energy that we're working with. So now let's look at this. Sri Kaleshwar came with a very specific purpose, and his purpose was to reintroduce the Divine Mother back to us, back to the people. He said that over and over and over again. So now we're going to dive into recognizing he was more of a modern individual that we can recognize. But let's see how this plays out, as the individual we know as Jesus was also one of these individuals that was enacting one of these blue ray missions or Christos mission directives. Perhaps the most powerful, so continuing on here, perhaps the most powerful and perfect expression of the fruition of the ancient knowledge of life of Mother Mary 2,000 years ago, a lifetime accumulating thousands of previous lifetime practice. Mary demonstrated the divine potential of every woman, creating the crystal diamond soul known as Jesus in her womb. The ancient knowledge reveals the spiritual technology of enlightenment of a soul in a womb. More than anyone else, Jesus and Mary are demonstrations of what is possible for all of humankind through these practices. So within this, let's dive and just look. We're talking about Mother Mary, and he's saying in here that this individual had to spend many, many incarnational cycles basically developing the ability to work with this level of energy, right? To be able to incarnate a particular being at this energy. So let's actually look starting first with Voyagers over here, and let's kind of look at this path of Jesus. So if you have the Voyagers 2 book, this is coming from page 99 on the chapter of the three Christs. And we're just going to slide down over here. And we're going to see that at this time, basically the Azurite Council was again implementing yet another plan. So basically, Akhenaten, which was a ninth level avatar, basically had only been able to come in and activate a certain amount of the codings that he was meant to activate. The Essene family lineage lines were carrying out that directive and that purpose in order for that completion to still come into fruition for the stellar activation cycle. So we're going to see that now at the time of around 12 BC, we're seeing under the direction of the Azurites of the Ra Confederacy. In 12 BC, the 12th level avatar of pure Taran, Taranusium 1 soul essence was born. So basically, we can recognize he was a 12th level avatar. What does 12th level mean? It means he was coming fully conscious and aware of all 12 strands of DNA levels of consciousness, which means he was able to be aware of his Christ avatar, Buddhic avatar, and nirvanic levels of consciousness within the 12 tree grid of life. So all the way up into that Christ avatar level of consciousness. But this individual was a pure Taran Taranusium. What was that? Well, this is part of the Orifim lineage line, right? The Orifims gave birth, or part of their prodigies were the Taranusiums. And the first seeding of the Taranusiums were the more advanced prototype, almost like an Adamic type of being that was much larger, had full consciousness, did not have any amnesia at all. And within this, we're recognizing one of an avatar at that level incarnated all the way down into the first harmonic universe, into the third dimension, right? And so, in order to do that, it took a very advanced female to be able to hold the crystalline code within her womb or womb chakra in order for that soul to come in and not lose or be distorted in the entry point by any of um the seals, the frequency fences, the frequency nets, or any of that that magnetically like mind wipe us on the way in. So there was a massive ritual that was done in order to actually allow this being to come in with full consciousness. So let's look at who was she then. So he's coming in as a pure Taran Taranusium 1 soul essence. Now, he was born to a blue flame Melchizedek Hebrew Essene mother. This is the J12. Was born to a blue flame Melchizedek, so a pure Melchizedek line that was not distorted. It was not a Templar Anu Melchizedek. This was not a hybridized Melchizedek in any way. This was the pure blue flame Melchizedek lineage. And then with the Hebrew tribal line in the Essene tribal family, okay? And then the father was a blue flame Melchizedek Hebrew cloister Essene father. So within this, we're going to see they were both pretty pure in their line, in their energies of the blue flame Melchizedek lineage line. This was not an immaculate conception, but rather orchestrated via traditional means through a couple chosen and prepared by the priests of Ur. His mother's name was Jehudi, his father Johesis. Both were leaders within the Blue Flame Melchizedek Essene sect. Okay, now the child soul essence was born of the fourth harmonic universe, right? So again, the fourth harmonic universe is going to be dimensioned 10, 11, and 12. This is going to be the levels of all of the Lyran stations of identity within there, and that he had full remembrance of himself as his avatar in that state. And she's saying here that that avatar's name was Sananda. This child was named Yeshua Melchizedek, herein Yeshua 12 or J12. Okay. So the personages of Mary and Joseph were not the parents of the avatar of the ninth level avatar. So I want to now start to really differentiate between these two, because this is a really interesting fact for us, you guys. We're going to look at a few different texts, and we have to just always hold some light discernment within ourselves that goes, okay, so there are storylines of the what we would call more of the true Yeshua 12, who was the pure avatar coming from the royal Lyran houses. Okay. And this individual came in with the full genetic imprints within to basically give us back all of our blueprints that we need. And this is in some ways why this being was called the Savior, not because they were saving us in particular ways, but because they were bringing re-embedments for our blood for the 12 strands of DNA for the reinstatement of our consciousness. Now, this being J12, it was also orchestrated through these Azurites to also incarnate a secondary Yeshua at this time. Okay, so this just makes it very interesting. And so now we have a J9. Well, a J9 is going to be connected to the Nephilim. We don't really think of that, right? This is fascinating, you guys. So when we think of Akhenaten coming in as a ninth level avatar, there was a huge weight on that individual's shoulder to enact a Christos mission. But this individual, again, was a hybrid. It was a hybridized lineage line that was running Christic lines that were blended with these Nephilim lines. So we're going to see the Nephilim lines are actually connected to the Jehovian lines. But it makes us question now. It makes us go like, well, this is interesting. The Nephilim lines. We've always heard, oh, Nephilim, so bad, so bad. Well, we know their story to a degree, and I want to dive in more about the Nephilim with you guys. But one of the things to understand is the Nephilim, you know, yes, there were some that were acting really quite heinously, but from the Nephilim collective, many of them were actually off planet working with Christos mission. And so it helps us understand a little bit maybe why there was an indigo type 3 race created, that many of us are incarnated as indigo type 3, which is actually rehabilitating the Nephilim lineage lines. Well, we're recognizing the Nephilims have actually been working alongside, and let's be very clear, okay? As a contemplation, we know a portion of their collective has to have been working alongside the Azurites. In fact, they're the children of them to a degree, right? Because they've actually come slightly from that lineage line, but then they've been hybridized. They're kind of a mix hybridization with the Anunnaki. So we know that, it's kind of like a mixed child and a mixed baby. Well, a mixed baby is going to have the ability to connect to either side of the parents potentially. So this is something I want us to think about a little bit as we kind of look at this, because we're going to bring the J9 in a little bit more. The J9 is going to be the one that is more spoken about or talked about within the Gnostic teachings or the texts and Bibles and things like this. So within this, let's continue, and it says Joshua 12 was born to descendants of the house of Solomon and was taken in infancy to the custody of the priests of Ur. So his parents didn't even raise him. And I actually highlighted this, the house of Solomon, because everything was about bloodlines and lineages. And, the house of Solomon actually became something that got really distorted and seals put around access to it. So this is something just to kind of note. He was born as a descendant of the house of Solomon as a blue flame Melchizedek Hebrew Essene. So, but coming in as a full avatar from the fourth harmonic universe. Okay, so now In 7 BC, the Elohim orchestrated the birth of a ninth level avatar. So there was two of them that came in that had a similar primary purpose. Now, the ninth level avatar was meant to reintegrate the Templar axiom sealed souls of Sirius B back into the sphere of Amente and restructure the patriarchal Templar creed to a more reflective one of the Law of One. So what this is saying is that, again, Akhenaten had this purpose. He was a ninth level avatar that came in, and his purpose was to reinstate the Law of One back and to help all of the distorted hybridizations and mixed genealogies that were getting embedded with these Templar axiom seals to begin to help find the way to clear that out enough so that more and more of the tribes and the race lines could actually make it through the halls of Amenti, or the sphere of Amenti. That's what's happening right now. The sphere of Amenti coming back online with this stellar activation cycle. So this is really relevant for us in the now, even though we're talking about something potentially 2,000 years ago with the Jesus story. Now, within this, J9 came in, but we want to recognize what is his heritage, what is his bloodline within him. So he was again meant to bring a more reflective energy back to the Law of One. This child was named Jeshua, herein Jeshua 9, and the stories of his birth to the Hebrew Melchizedek, Essenes, Mary, and Joseph are recorded as the birth of Jesus in contemporary Christian doctrine. Jeshua was not born of immaculate conception either, but rather through the visitation of an ET Nephilim, who, like King Melchizedek, was part of the entity named Jehovah. The entity Jehovah, who was one of the original contributors to the creation of the Syrian Anunnaki races of Harmonic Universe 2. So this individual is basically being incarnated in through an entity that was responsible pretty much for creating the Syrian Anunnaki races. So this being had also worked with the Elohim since the time of the Treaty of El Anu, 848,000 years ago. Jeshua's mother Mary was also born of an extraterrestrial Nephilim conception. Following the events of Akhenaten's reign, the Elohim did not want knowledge of extraterrestrial ancestry available to the general human population, so the truth of Yeshua's birth was hidden within the story of the Immaculate Conception. Through the centuries that followed the births of the two avatars and their lives of story of J12 and J9, plus another man, really all got consolidated into one individual called Jesus Christ. So wow, big, right? So now we're sitting here going like, okay, the Elohim, we've done a video and I still want to do more on the Elohim because this all goes deep, you guys. So now we're sitting here going like, okay, so these Nephilim, this is an extraterrestrial visitation of a Nephilim from the Jehovah entity that's working alongside to help bring more of the Law of One. So it's really telling us that even if an entire collective, we have to kind of question this and go like, okay, well, that means that there's an entity named Jehovah, and some of the beings that express out of this entity are actually more aligned to wanting to bring the Law of One, if we're reading it this way. So we're reading in here that even some of these extraterrestrial Nephilim were working towards bringing the codes necessary to help clear out. So again, it's to reintegrate the Templar axiom sealed souls that were being blocked out of Sirius B in order to help heal these family lines, to help get them out of here so that they could return through the sphere of Amenti. This is amazing as we start to look at this, because again, my indigo 3 family, it puts a different spin on being an indigo type 3, doesn't it? It makes us question a little bit more potentially what we're looking at here. Now, With the birth of Yeshua 12, the 12th level avatar, the Hebrew and Melchizedek morphogenetic field in Alcyone was reintegrated into the sphere of Amenti. So just through his birth here, it already, just his birth began to reset the morphogenetic field in Alcyone and reintegrate it with the seal of the sphere of Amenti. Through Yeshua 12, the integrity of the Hebrew Melchizedek genetic imprint was restored, and he became known by some as the savior of the Jewish peoples for this reason. This is massive. This is, again, just a reminder to us that you being born here is so important. This 12th level avatar just being born on the planet automatically started to shift things and to begin to reintegrate energies for entire bloodline collectives. That is massive. So I want to read one last little thing over here as we tie in to some of the other texts I want to explore with you. And it's saying here, again, many portions had been trapped within Earth's D2 morphogenetic field. So it's through his birth the halls of Amente could once again be reopened. But also, one thing I really wanted to highlight is where he started to learn. So within the Voyager's materials, J12 basically immediately from birth got taken in by the priests of Ur. The priests of Ur, for the most part, did not live with the surface population. A lot of the priests of Ur either lived within a lot of the inner earth portals, to the temple spaces, but they had access to a lot of the inner earth sanctums within. So he immediately really got pulled out of the collective of the karmic field of humanity for who knows how long. He was really just being guarded and protected by these high level beings that would have been shielding his energy, so it wouldn't have had to deal with, at the infancy stage, it would not have had to deal with any karmas or traumas from being in the first harmonic universe. How amazing would that be, to be born and to be shielded from karmas until you got old enough to learn how to move them yourself, right? So within that, he also then started to go into levels of study at a particular age. And so she's bringing it in here at the age of 20. Um, actually, it would have been a little before then, but saying following his study in Persia and Asia. So a little before the age of 20, he would have first been studying in Persia and Asia. So this is key because, again, what were we reading in this ancient knowledge over here with the Sri Kaleshwar information is Vishvamitra Maharishi is literally bringing forth all these palm leaf energies, and these, the Septarishi channels, the holy womb chakra work, the another one which was the Shri yantra, all of these that Vishvamitra had written. J12 spent extensive amounts of his life studying this material and learning it. Many said he had a very high um, Persian and Indian overtone to a lot of what he shared because of it. At the age of 20, he was then taken to Egypt by the priests of Ur. So he's now being taken to Egypt to study with these initiation practices. And these, generally, the ones in Egypt, were the initiation rites for moving out of body. A lot of these were the transcendence of death types of processes, right? So really high level energies of work. And it was saying that even he, at different times as he got older, and I'm just kind of gonna summarize because I there's quite a bit of text here, is that later Jeshua 12, so J12, became one of the teachers for J9, which is fascinating, right? So they knew each other. They actually were on a very similar mission, yet each in a unique way. One was very much, but the J9 was much more attuned to clearing and healing the Templar seals off of bloodlines and helping entire collectives make it through the sphere of Amente. J12 was restoring entire halls to really restore the Alcyone energies and really bring almost a blanket blueprint down into reinstating the 12 strands wisdoms back onto the planet for the all the tribes, all the collectives within there. So I did want to look at one more interesting thing because you're seeing me right on the sides, the key terms of the Azurites. So through J12, the Hebrew Essene races that followed the blue flame cloister Melchizedek scenes were appointed by the Azurites of Ra. I think this is a very interesting statement, and I want to explore this a little bit more, especially as we look into some of the extraterrestrials. We want to recognize the Azurites, for all intents and purposes, are an extraterrestrial race line of beings. They're coming primarily from Lyra and Lyra in the Syrian area as well. So these are the tall whites, and they have a blue hue to them. So in some ways they're going to look a lot like the tall whites, in the way that they look, and this is very interesting. So now we have Nephilim playing into this, we have Elohim playing into this, we have avatars coming from different levels and planes, and then we have basically primarily the crux of it all is the Azurites are really the ones directing all of this with and through the Ra family and the Ra Confederacy. So the Ka, Ra, Ya, Sa, Ta, Ha, La. The Ra is going to be one of the sons, one of the Christar sons, and their collective primarily coming through. So this is very interesting, and I want to now tie in a couple of other things. So if we were to come in here now, we're going like, okay, we have a possibility, even when we look at Sri Kalishwar's work, that we sit here and go like, he only makes reference to just Jesus. He just says Jesus and Mary. But we're going to just start to let ourselves start to expand and go like, isn't that interesting? Both had a different purpose. Both had a different message. In some ways, both were studying the same materials. There's a part of me that really thinks in a huge way that it was the J12 that was really working with the Vishvamitra materials, and I leave that open to you to kind of be with that as you sit and listen to a little bit more of this, because we're going to understand that the J9 also had miraculous gifts and capabilities. He also studied with J12, which would have also been studying with potentially this palm leaf manuscripts as the miracles abilities. So let's now look at some more information on the crystal and the emerald, because I want to talk about this. He really now starts to talk about every woman creating the crystal diamond soul, known as Jesus in her womb. Well, what is a crystal soul and what is a diamond soul? I'd like to explore that with you guys through the Ascension Glossary. And if we were to look up over here, crystal heart, we're going to see it takes us to a page called Sacred Crystal Heart, White Diamond Sun Shield. I love this artwork by Elizabeth. And it's saying here the sacred crystal heart, or our pure heart, which holds the feelings and language that communicates directly with the God source and gives us the gift of experiencing unconditional love and peace. Skipping down a little bit, it's saying, thus, the most important organ system and spiritual light body component for every person on earth is their sacred crystal heart complex. Well, remember, J12 came in with the capability. He had the crystal heart. If we cross reference this, a way that we could perceive this is our crystal heart is actually allowing us, like a transmitter or a radio receiver, the ability to actually communicate all the way to the fourth harmonic universe and the Lyran Royal Councils, right? Our Christ avatar God self. So even as you see here, it says it functions to receive and transmit the omnidirectional. So all directions actually. Omni is every direction. Forces of love, and through which the inner wisdom of cellular knowing arises. All of us have an inner compass that is our spiritual guidance system that is blessed in the forces of love flowing from within our heart complex. So it goes on. This is a great little section if you wanted to dive into it more, but I did want to key point this within here. And it says the earth body functions as the sacred crystal heart complex for the entire solar system. So that gives us a little bit of a clue again as to why earth is so important. She has so many wombs. She's a very powerful mother. So there, she's saying here that the entire solar system um, is feeding off of this sacred heart crystal that the earth is emanating. So during the ascension cycle, as humanity raises and expands collective race consciousness, the impacts ripple out to the influence of the neighboring worlds and other species. Right there, that right there, you guys, that you might go like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on in the cosmos and the universe and all of this. Well, we're literally incarnated right now on a body. And in some ways, this even expands these ahas of, recognizing, why do the Septarishis keep reincarnating in? Why do the incarnates keep coming into this plane? Well, we're going to see that there is something special, just our being here in a physical form, emanating our own sacred crystal heart. We amplify the crystalline core of the earth, or the sacred crystal heart of the earth, which actually extends as um, a way to affect all of our solar system and our neighboring worlds and other species. So one of the things I always like to remember, because I think it's such a great story for us, is the 100th monkey story, right? That we can think that enough of us wakes up, that all the other planets, kind of like being other islands, even if they don't see us directly, that they'll be affected by the sacred crystal heart in which we are emanating. If we look in this text again, she gave birth to a crystal diamond soul known as Jesus in her womb. And that is just amazing to really start to contemplate within these energies. So now let's start to dive into some of these other concepts and stories. And I'm going to tie in, we're just going to see how it flows, because there's a lot of different things I want to share with you guys. So now within this, let's go ahead and start to look at this concept of the Septarishis, because this is also a really big thing. The Septarishis are seen as these beings that they basically herald the information and wisdom for um, humanity to expand their consciousness. They basically, their job is to kind of keep the wisdoms always embedded and implanted. So they will bury it at particular times in order to keep it safe. They will come back and unbury it at different times in order to bring it back into humanity. And they really serve as kind of a guardian purpose for a lot of these other cosmic missions. So I would even kind of venture to say they work alongside the Azurite councils and these Azurite directives as they are putting these implementations of these births into play. So now let's kind of look at the idea of the Septarishis within here. So the Septarishis, or the great seven sages, they are revered figures in the Hindu cosmology, but I want to tie into some other perspectives of the Septarishis. So they basically, and let me give you this image over here. Um, so within here, there's multiple different ones, and I'm going to highlight this one in here. This is a page from Wikipedia that we could look at for the Septarishis. And so as we look at this, each and every one has a different gift that they would share. The septa again means seven. So they are the seven rishis. Again, the seven great sages, or the seven rishis. Septarishi just sounds really cool and fancy, but it just means seven rishis. Well, remember, in the enlightened times, we're all rishis. So I don't know if I'll have time today, but there is text, and I do believe it's from the works of maybe it's from the works of Freddie Silva, if I'm correct, in his book Missing Lands, which we're going to look at, where there is references to many different Septarishis or sages, the sevens, and we're going to look at these from different types. So there's seven sages in all kinds of different ways. So there's even the seven sages in Greece. There's the energy sometimes of the watchers kind of fall from there. The Onis in the Babylonian, which are the Babylonian fishmen, these are also really closely related to something called the Apkallu. The Apkallu is again a reference of these. They were like these fishmen, and they would come out of the seas, and there were seven of them, and they were teaching humanity. They would teach humanity all of the wisdom of the stars, of astronomy, of social, of um, civilization, libraries, all of these things. So the Septarishis are basically rishis or wise men that incarnate in, that are always kind of embedded with giving the wisdom back to the people. There's a couple other. There's also within the Viracocha, in Incan mythology, we're going to see a bit from there. Um, Within these seven sages, they basically come to humanity. They come to humanity in order to assist in each cycle of our manifestation, our creations, each of these yuga cycles, to help maintain the balance of dharma on earth, which is righteousness. And the sages are often associated with the constellation Ursa Major, the Big Dipper. So this is really what I want to get to here. So we're going to see there's seven of these sages here. I won't disrespect them by trying to read all their names because I'm not super versed on reading them, but we are going to primarily focus on the energy of working with Vishvamitra and his story within these seven rishis. So I want to start with this idea of that there are seven rishis. They come in sevens for some reason, but they are associated. Let me see if I can find it on here because I'm pretty sure it even says it on here. Yeah, right here on the Wikipedia page for the Septarishis, you're going to see it in astronomy, in ancient Indian astronomy. The asteroid of the Big Dipper, part of the constellation of Ursa Major, is called Septarishi, with the seven stars representing seven rishis. And then here's their names of these seven rishis. Okay, so keep that in mind for just a moment as we now look at this next text over here. So now within here, I wanted to take you through a little bit of a journey of all of these different places that have connections to the Septarishis. So even within the story of Shiva, it's told that the Septarishis sat with him and learned his teachings. And then if you listen to the story says, then the Septarishis went to the seven regions of the world. Well, I do find it very interesting that there are seven continents of the world. So that is even a match. So that if you recognize the Septarishis were meant to share these wisdoms all around the world. Well, every tradition has these different beings that are referred to like these Septarishis. In the Andean traditions, the megalithic monument builders by the nickname Harari were a race of white-skinned, bearded, red-haired tall people led by a god named Viracocha, who appeared after the flood on a boat on a lake together with the seven Hyopanti. I don't think I'm saying that right. So I'll just expand the screen here. Haihua Yi Panti, or the Shining Ones. Okay, so Viracocha is known to also travel with seven rishis or seven sages, but I also want to start to bring into awareness to you guys, these guys are also corresponding to the beings that are referred to as the Shining Ones. So now let's look at just a couple more within here. I'm just going to take you on a few. The first survivors, now we're looking at the Easter Islands. The Easter Islands we know is a major point with megalithic stone carvings there. And it says the first survivors to reach the Easter Island after the flood are said to have come from a massive Pacific island called Hiva, which submerged under the sea due to the mischief of Oki's lever. These were the 300 people picked up by Hotu Matua and her 7 sages, right there. All initiated men whose first task upon arriving was the construction of the hua. So the interesting thing about this, and we'll have to do this at another time, is to recognize that all of these timelines, when it's talking about these flood timelines, a lot of these timelines correspond then to the fall of Atlantis, or the flood that came close to the fall of Atlantean time. So about 10 to 12,000 years ago. I don't have the exact time in my head right now. But as we look at this, that this would have set off what they call the Younger Dryas time on the planet, where the shifting and the changing of the continents, islands collapsing, islands rising, all of these different things happening. And within there, in order to preserve the knowledge, there's all of these stories around the world of these 7 sages, just with different names, just a little bit different in the stories, but where the wisdom teachings went to help them rebuild their civilizations again. So if we look over here, 65. So this book we're reading again is called Missing Lands by Freddie Silva. It's a fascinating book. So now we have a look at Gobekli Tepe area. And as we look at this, if we come down here, one of the most famous archaeological discoveries in the Olmec world. Okay, so he's actually moved down to the Olmec world, Mesoamerica. Concerns a unique stela of what ancient alien theorists adamantly believe to be the astronaut riding a space capsule, except the capsule is in fact a rattlesnake. But that is not the real riddle here, for in hand of this astronaut, who incidentally appears to be wearing either a beard or a stylized snake helmet or both, holds exactly the same container. A close look at the rattlesnake's head reveals a feathered crown, a feature also depicted on the head of the Sumerian zoomorphic falcon-headed figures called Apkallu. And this one, there's a whole story. There's really neat stories you can read about the Apkallu. The These beings, again, they are the 7 sages, the title given to a group of 7 antediluvian emissaries entrusted with bringing the civilization arts to humanity following the flood. These men, when you read their story of the Apkallu, they are half men, half fish, and they in the evenings they would turn back into fish and go back into the waters, and in the mornings they would come out of the waters and shapeshift into humans and go around and teach people, and then in the evenings they would go back into the water. Well, it's really interesting because their stories very similar to the Dogon tribe, about the Nomo beings, which basically they could come out of the water, but they were much more comfortable in the water. And this is actually very indicative of many of the Sirian beings from the Sirius star system are much more aquatic in their form, so they don't actually prefer to be out of the water. Now, let me just do one more for you guys over here. Um, there's another story over here. The Tongavera tradition not only places the Anunnaki at the Central Pacific 3000 BC, it also claims the link to extend back to the Great Flood, when they lived on an island somewhere in the region of what is today a vast desert. If they also journeyed westwardly to Naku, pardon me about not saying these correctly, Tiwanaku. Ostensibly, the Anunnaki may be the same people as the Viracocha and his 7 white-skinned, red-haired, shining ones. I do want you guys to just kind of start to put in the back of your mind this whole idea of the red-haired. White-skinned, red-haired. Okay, just kind of keep that as a pinpoint within there. And then we'll definitely talk a bit about the shining ones. Um, So the white skin, red haired, shining ones. Least of all because the same description of the Anunnaki is given in the post flood Mesopotamia seven sages of Apakalu, based by a charismatic leader, and they appear from the sea, depicted as half human, half fish, and nicknamed the Shining Ones. Both groups were tall and bearded. We could just as well be describing the Urukehu. In fact, it looks as though these once desperate groups of gods now appear to be one of the same people. So, again, they're just saying all of these different places around the world have very, very similar stories that really match. And I'll just do this last one over here because then it's just going to tie in an Asian story. We don't want to leave the Asians out. Seven tall sages and other immortals. So again, this is also rather significant within here because we've been talking about the Nephilim quite a bit. Now, the Rishis and the Septarishis, the Rishis, so coming from the fifth harmonic universe, these solar beings, right? But we're also going to tie this into Ursa Major. We know they're also connected to Ursa Major. Well, we also know they're very tall. They tend to be more bearded. They tend to have a very pale skin. They also tend to be called the shining ones. From the work of Freddie Silva, if you listen to some of his work or his books, it's very clear that there are a lot of texts that said their skin didn't really handle this earth atmosphere very well. And so they used to have to put a salve or some kind of thing on their skin that made their skin kind of shiny or glisten, as well as they had a bit more of a radiance to them because they were very quite pale. So again, like we're thinking about the tall whites as we look at some of these extraterrestrial races. But that's part of why I also think they really either liked going into darker places or in the waters, but they had to wear something to protect their very, very delicate skin. So it also added to the energy of the shining ones. But the tall is also very important because it ties into a lot of the stories of the giants on the earth. And I just want to keep adding this because remember, we got J9, who was connected to the Nephilim. He was part of that lineage line. And we're also recognizing as part of that, he was actually on a Christos mission. So again, my Indigo 3 family, just something to contemplate. Now we have the seven tall sages and other immortals. Myths materialized around the world to record a posterity for posterity the crashing of aerial projectiles and the terrifying flood that ensued. So this is actually a huge story with all of it is basically like a comet and these asteroids coming that a lot of the quote unquote gods did not stop. It's like they allowed it to happen. So part of the theory of that mythology was to actually eradicate a significant amount of the population on the earth, whether it be the eradication of the Nephilim, which I actually think was at a much, much earlier time in a history, so different. But within this, just to recognize that this was known, this wasn't some random thing that happened to the earth. It happened almost on a time schedule. Whenever this comet would come into this area, it just had a lot of these projectiles and asteroids that it would fling towards the earth. And I actually think the negative alien agenda would utilize that to their benefit at times in order to wipe out things or change the structure of the earth. It's just one thought. um it's saying here now, without exception, the stories also describe pockets of survivors being assisted by groups of unusual looking people who appeared from the sea to teach them the accoutrements required for starting or restarting civilization. Very interesting. Also curious if they are tied to the Nagas. You know, again, the Nagas are very, very connected to the sea. So now each group consisted of seven individuals led by a charismatic eighth. The leader is always partnered with a wife who is also the sister. Osiris and Isis. So Osiris and Isis in Egypt, Enlil and Ninlil in Mesopotamia, Fu Sui and Nuhua in China, Izanami and Izanagi in Japan, Viracocha and his unnamed wife in the Andes, and probably Kiva and Hotu Matua on Easter Island. So I just wanted to add that within there, just one more thing. So now, as we start to look at these Septarishis and these seven sages, it's very interesting to think about them. They do have a huge connection to the sea, to fish, to basically the appearance of them tends to be more of an energy of these pale white beings within here. Now let's start to tie in a little bit more to where are we going to tie this in to the Septarishis and tie it back into Jesus. So what we can say, and this is actually a book, and this is a book from Andrew Collins called Cygnus Mystery. This one's on page 243 here, and it says what we can say is that the seven swans which draw Brahman's chariot are probably linked with the seven swans that are believed to fly down from heaven and land on Lake Manasovar near Brahma's terrestrial abode on Mount Kailash in southwestern Tibet. They are said to be the seven rishis, enlightened poets or priests, who on rising to heaven become the seven stars of Ursa Major. They assume the role of swans to visit the place where the Vedas were thought to have been conceived, i.e., in the Himalayan hills and mountains around the Lake Manasarovar of the sources of the Saraswati River. So I just wanted to add that. And I'm going to close these out as we now start to play with the seven rishis. So now, okay, we've got these seven rishis. We're realizing they're all over the world. They show up in all of these different forms. Again, they're said to kind of all appear kind of at the same time in all of these cultures. So there is thought that there are multiple of these seven rishis. So, as we could expand this is something just to keep in the back of our thought as a probability or a possibility that they're emanating beings that come from potentially the Ursa Major system and these seven stars. So now let's look at a couple more of these perspectives. And we're going to look at this through the concept of the Pleiades. If you look at the Ascension Glossary and the Pleiades, also known as the Seven Sisters, Matariki, and Messier 45. And it's an open star cluster containing middle-aged hot B type stars in the northwest of the constellation Taurus. sounds hot B type stars. Kind of sounds like a dating site. Silly. So now as we look at here, we know the Pleiades right here, the seven sisters. As we're connecting to this, the energy of Alcyone, it is connected to the second harmonic universe. It is connected to the Taran Earth timeline. The name the Seven Sisters has been used for the Pleiades in the language of many, many cultures. So I'm just highlighting right here, including indigenous groups of Australia, North America, and Siberia. This suggests that the name may have a common ancient origin. So we know as we look at the Pleiades, we do recognize this as the seven sacred sons, of definitely a female energy in all the mythologies and the histories. And as we look at this from the Voyagers' perspectives, we know the Pleiades is connected to where Alcyone is. Alcyone is going to be our fifth sphere in our tree of life, and it is also where the planetary body of Tara is located. We know that it had an explosion within it, so parts of it flew away, but Tara is still there, and we are doing the healing work and the bridge work and all of that. During ascension cycles, what happens is the photonic belt that is connected to the Pleiades begins to create an orbit which starts to pull in our Earth from our solar system as the eighth Pleiadian star. So this is something that you'll see through the Ascension Glossary, through a lot of different astronomy types of things. If you just start to let yourself expand with the idea that the sun is actually one of the eighth, actually, not the seven sisters, it would be the eighth. Now, some would perceive of our sun as having a more masculine energy, especially if you look at it through the stellar nations perspective and that cosmology within there. They're going to call the sun's solara and uh, I hope I'm saying that one right. I don't have it right in front of me. But masculine, considered the brother, and then his seven sisters. But in any regard, our sun in our solar system is actually a fallen sun from the Pleiadian star system. And this is shown in multiple different types of ways. Well, now if we look at this, we'd go like, okay, so we can recognize our solar system has a harmony with this energy. Well, there's another harmony that the Pleiades has, and it's said to have a harmony with Ursa Major, or the Big Bear, or the seven stars in the Big Dipper. So it says right here as you move on, the main solar body, our visible sun, is undergoing an evolution, and that its magnetic pole is reversing, which is further altering the solar ray transmissions to Earth and to other planets. This change also alters a function of the constellation Ursa Major, in which the seven main stars are sequentially merging forces with their counterpart, the seven sister stars in the Pleiades. The resulting alchemical merge of these constellation of stars is manifesting a new expression of creation in the higher cosmic planes, and this is referred to as the seven sacred suns in the one. The collective spiritual suns are also called aurora sun. This is cool. Ursa Major restrict suns. These seven stars are that which act as electromagnetic ray spectrum lenses, which transmit the various streams of the ray structure through the three main gateways which lead to the sun and then to Earth. The principle of masculine active force of these stars is called the Rishik suns. It is the new activity of the Rishik suns that are changing the masculine principle through the alteration of the seven ray particle structure. The Rishik suns are sequentially merging with the seven sister stars in the Pleiades in the Taurus constellation of the Bull. So this is amazing, because if we think about this, it's saying here they hold a masculine energy to them. So the Rishik energies, again, if you think of it, they act as electromagnetic ray spectrum lenses that transmit the various streams of the ray structure. And then they move that energy through the sun. Well, we know that the sun is also represented by the energy of Ra. So we can see how that step down of energy of even the Ra Confederacy then moves through these solar bodies as ways to bring the logos or the law or the template of holding the morphogenetic fields into place within these solar systems. Now, it's just a thought. So if we now think of these Septarishis, these seven sages in all these different cultures coming from these emissaries, well, if we were to look at this from the perspective of the stellar nations, the Ursa Major constellation and those seven stars are connected to the Christ consciousness family lines, the bears, the Christ bears. And these Christ bears, they uphold these seven pillars, and I don't have it off the top of my head the correct word that they use in the stellar nations, whether they use the knowledges or the laws within there, but the energy within this is very much like the Rishik or the Septa Rishis, the seven Rishis. What are they doing? They are bringing the wisdoms, they are bringing these rays, and they do always show up in this male energy in whatever mythology we look at, but there's usually always some female involved, and the female is the one that brings kind of like the energy of the transmitting of the wisdoms, the ability to actually perpetuate the bloodlines and to bring the wisdoms into a recognizable way. Well, what is that? We've actually done a talk one time about the Eye of Ra. What is the Eye of Ra is a title for these females who actually hold the wisdoms of the cosmos, and then they come as like these emissaries to share it through, such as Sekhmet, Isis. These beings were these emissaries. So I do find that very, very interesting as we look into this, because one of the things to recognize is now we have a 12th level avatar that is coming from uh basically this Terran Terranusium pure soul essence, but connected to the fourth harmonic universe. But we also have a J9 avatar that has a Nephilim connection to it, also to the Jehovah entity. So we got these two Yeshuas. Now, I want to present yet another thought for you, and this is coming from some ancient Gnostic texts. This particular thing I want to share with you is coming from a text that is referred to as the Questions of Mary. And this text is a little bit different than there is a text called the Gospel of Mary. And there is a beautiful video that is done by an individual named Neil Sendlak, Sendlak. So within here in this gospel, it's talking about Ealdabuth. So Ealdabuth being one of the archons that was birthed into creation. And this birthing of Ealdabuth into creation has said to have been what has created a lot of the distortions. That a lot of the Christos mission itself is literally to offset a lot of the plans and implementations that have been put into place by this character known as Ealdabuth. And I'm just going to highlight this right in here. And this is actually from the book, The Dream of Eternal Time, the Book of Nerea by Anton Parks. And so if you look over here, Ealdabuth is Barbello's fifth child. He is a great archon according to the Gnostics and the creator of the Kingu Babar. Well, the Kingu Babar, if we wanted to translate that to other terms, that's going to be like the sea car or the white Dracos. The more aggressive of them, they think themselves to be the leaders or the rulers within there. So now take this into effect within here, and within this text, it's a text called Questions Concerning Mary. Within here, Ealdabuth, they're talking about Ealdabuth. And within there, they say, no, Jesus is from a different God. Jesus is from Barbello. And Barbello is associated with Sophia. They call Barbello the mother father. Like it's like a figure. It's like a very fascinating deity, the character of all things. She has wisdom incarnate and is descending from the highest aeons of the monad. So within there, they're saying that Barbello and Jesus have both come from the eighth heaven, and that Ealdabud is coming from the seventh heaven. Okay, so I want you just to just be with that for just a moment. Let me bring you up over here. Barbello. Let me see if they have Barbello. Barbello in this particular book is actually a later reincarnation. She is referred to within these books as the mother of origins. So now I want to take you on a little bit of a journey on this idea of Barbello and Ealdabud and these realms, because as we're working with these energies, we're working with the womb chakra, we're working with clearing things, we're working with where are we going after this? What world do we want to go to? What is all the dramas? Why did Christ have to come back to earth to save or to work with anything? Why are we working with all of this repair? Well, I'm going to bring you some more questions. But within these questions, let's look at this through the perspective of the energy of Ealdabud and Barbellos, just so we can kind of explore this a little bit more. Who is Ealdabud, first of all? Again, he's the fifth child. So we can sit and go like, if that Gnostic text is sitting there going like, oh, well, Jesus is of Barbello, then how is also Ealdebud Barbello of Barbello? Well, let's see if this text gives us a little bit of an idea of it. It says here, he is the first archon, the one who took the great power from his mother. Then he separated from her and departed from the places where he was raised. He became strong and created other aeons for himself, flamboyant with a luminous fire that still exists today, and he united with his own folly and conceived authorities for himself. So this is definitely talking about Ealdebud here. And then again, it says, and above the throne, he created other dragon shaped angels called seraphim, who give glory to him at all times. And he created an angelic assembly, innumerable thousands and myriads, similar to the assembly of the Ogadad. And then we'll do one more. The impudent archon therefore stole one of his mother's powers. This is key because you can see it. It says it right up here. He's the one who took the great power from his mother. So this is where we're starting to see that energy of the Akamoth, or the dark mother. Let me see if uh, right here, the Akamoth or the Dark Mother. That again, this energy, and it's even talking about womb worlds within here, but this energy is basically the taking. This is the part of this Christosophian fallen consciousness is called the Akamoth, and the subsequent impregnated creations that are enmeshed in the negative form body is mixed with the fallen angelics and the earthly forces. This is called the Baphomet field. So I think Yaldabud is kind of like the inception, if you will, of this Sophia Akamoth energy that is created. So if we go back over here, we're seeing again, he stole one of his mother's powers, but he was ignorant and believed that no others existed apart from his mother. Seeing the crowd of angels he had created, he rose above them. But once the mother understood that the dark runt was imperfect, she at the same time understood that her spouse had not taken to her with one voice. She repented abundant tears. So this is, let me see if I can summarize this story for you. So within here, we're going to now cut into a scene. So let me kind of build the story for you from the Anton Parks book here and a meshing of the Gnostic stories. So within this, we would see this as Barbello. Barbello has given birth, but she's actually given birth to multiple creations. That there was actually 4 other children she gave birth to before she gave birth to Ealdebud. That Ealdebud was kind of um, a creation that she created. She had actually made contact with one of the Kingu Babar, so one of these draconian type of beings. And when she made contact with it, the way that a triple parthenogenesis birther is just by making contact with the genetics or the DNA of a particular creature, she was able to actually replicate an offspring based on some of this form. Now, within this, as she gave birth to the others were all these beautiful, primarily Syrian type of beings, very high level beings, benevolent beings, loving beings, very Christically aligned beings that were very helpful. And when these beings were born, she was just in love with these children. And then all of a sudden, Yaldabud was born, and immediately when he came out, she knew something was wrong. And within that, it's like she tried to hide the panic that she had. She tried to hide the worry that she had, but he was so brilliant and had so much of her powers that he immediately knew and already had, like, instantaneously all of her abilities, if you will, these like creator abilities. So within this, she has come back to him here. It says, at the moment, as if crossing a mirror, a large silhouette descended from the sky and slipped silently between the individuals that were frozen in time in space. Okay, so it's like It's like she's in the scene and all of a sudden individuals in the scene around her. It's like all of a sudden you're walking and they freeze. It's like she's like, what the heck? All of a sudden, Ealdebut, the immaculate king, strayed out of the night of the world, appeared in the heart of matter in an alluring splendor. He was more voluminous than when he emerged from the egg in the cave a handful of days before. Like the king Galam, Ealdebut had immaculate white hair. Radiant particles seemed to have hit the damned child, causing the inexorable mutation that reshaped his genetic material. A long white coat woven with gold thread wrapped around his whole body, while an intense white light emphasized the character's majesty. Each of his footsteps in the sand seemed abnormally light. He says to her, "Mother, my dear, I have been watching you for some time," he said mockingly. "You hurry, you run, you rush all the time. What for? What are you doing here, Aldebuth? What have you done? Why are they all frozen?" Now here's the key. He says to her, "I snuck into your dream, in which it is easier to pause everything with a simple gesture." She then says to him, "I don't understand anything you're saying. How are you doing this?" He says, "You cannot grasp any of this because you lost all your natural powers the day you abandoned your king in the machine." So it's a bit of a story on that one. This is supposedly an image of him. And then Barbella was troubled by this statement to the point of being able to unanswer. Ealdebud stared at her with supernatural intensity, then looked around and said to her amusedly, "What an unusual place, mother. I can hardly believe that you came back here to give birth to me." She says, "You were born in this reality, and this is the one you belong to." Okay, so I want you guys to catch this. You were born in this reality. What did he do? He stepped into her dream. He actually entered into her dream and froze her dream. And then he's kind of mocking her and being like, "Why'd you come back here? What are you even doing in this dream bubble? What are you even doing here?" And she's saying to him, "You were born in this dream, and this is the one you belong to." Now, his answer is quite intense. He says, "Mother, your narrow dogmas amaze me greatly. This insignificant world is the reflection of other, far more extensive places where the laws of physics are sometimes reversed, where the boundaries between the worlds are both vast and derisory. You have proven it once before, thanks to your observations and your calculations. For you, I have exceeded time, just like the Kingalam. I immerged myself in distant places from galaxy to galaxy and at the heart of the sparkling tides of a billion stars. I have gone through gas, dust, and to the defined spectra of the frequency and wavelength of emitted light. I have passed through the flow of the thermal energy that escapes the stars and the chaotic fields of elemental matter. I have seen stars collapse, freezing space and time, and thus creating an elasticity of the temporal time. She is stupefied at this point. So I want you guys to remember he's literally like 2 days old. He's 2 days old. She knew from the moment he came into Inception that it was like, oh crap. He's mocking her because he's saying that when she lost her partner, her other half, basically she lost a lot of her power. So it's really talking about the power of the Hieros Gamos within there. But he has such immense gifts and capabilities that literally he's able to move forwards and backwards through all these temporal time. He's literally moved to all aspects of the universe and the cosmos simultaneously and back, and basically scanned it all in like 2 days. So she says to him, stupefied, "You physically did all of this?" "Of course, mother. I don't need a ship now that I have gone through the curve of time. My metabolism changed when I crossed the visible horizons of and when I was in contact with raw material. I have only been gone for a few days in your eyes, yet an eternity separates us. I observe the stellar furnaces at work, forging the material of the rocky worlds. The seeding of the interstellar space is no longer a secret to me." So it's going to go on and on from here. But one of the things I really wanted to highlight within this, he's so arrogant. He's so arrogant because he came out with the abilities. He's sparkling, he's white. I hope you got from even the description of him that if one was to see him, one would think they had met God. Honestly, because he has that dazzling and he has that mastery. He is really, truly a false god. Ealdabud is also Yahweh. FYI. So I wanted to um make sure I put that in because I should have said that earlier. Ealdabud is synonymous with Yahweh in whatever text, whatever works that you start to dive into, you're going to recognize Yahweh. Yahweh of the Bible is this very arrogant energy that feels as though they have dominion over everything. Well, why? Because when he was born, he just said it. He went to all reaches of the universe and determined, I'm the first one. This is me. This is mine. I am it, and he felt superior to his mother immediately. So, therefore, he basically began to create this massive separation as if he was king. He's calling himself king. You even see that in a lot of the biblical translations, the calling of God the king, right? What does Barbello do at this time? So now we're recognizing, okay, she actually has other beings, other creations. Barbello is this massive cosmic energy that is connected to the divine Christos Sophia. She is basically part of these aeons from these higher heavens, and she incarnates in as aspects, as beings of herself at multiple times. Barbello has incarnated in multiple different forms in order to continue on emerging into the dream and assisting from the inside. Two of her avatars or her apparitions have been Isis and another one being Mother Mary. So let's return to the Septarishis. So we remember now the Septarishis are these wise sages. They come from these God worlds, higher worlds, these other realms. And I want to tell it in a little bit of the Vedic or the Hindu perspective now, because we actually, from their perspective, start to get to understand the lokas or other dimensional worlds are actually other planetary places. So this really ties in beautifully with the Rishi's connections to Ursa Major, just as a side note, maybe for us to think about. But even if you really listen to a lot of the ways they talk about moving to the other lokas, traveling to these other planes of existence, that there is also intermingled with that this idea of actually traveling to other planets. And I think this is really special for us to just kind of log in the back of the mind as a curiosity, maybe, that really ties us into our 12 tree grid of life. This is also going to tie us in a bit to an understanding that what is this interplane or interdimensional travel? One of the things I love about the books of Anton Parks is it's one of the most tangible ways to actually start to see that our solar system is actually replicas of these other star systems, just on other timelines, other maybe time fractals. So now let's just play this in with the Septarishis for a moment. Now, within this, the Septarishis all have their own specialties. Some are more adept with maybe poetries or different gifts as far as that. So each of the Septarishis has a bit of a different gift. So some are known for, again, wisdom, maybe being certain savants as certain types of teachings. Others might have different spiritualized kind of technologies or things that they're more advanced with. Others might have more kind of like civilization kinds of gifts and abilities to share. Some are more warrior type energies in which they share with this. But they, for the most part, they're all scholarly in some way, but maybe like different types of professors, if you will, or different types of gifts and capabilities. Well, let's dive into this with the story of Vishvamitra. Vishvamitra, again, is responsible for creating the Gayatri mantra as well well as responsible for the transcriptions of these palm leaf manuscripts, of which we find the womb chakra and the Septarishi wisdom channels, as well as the Sri Yantra energy within there. So now let's dive into Vishvamitra's story, because his is very unique. And one of the things that a lot of the students of Sri Kaleshwar said is that telling the story of Vishvamitra was actually one of his favorite things to do. He would tell the story all the time, a little bit different every time. And some of his students have even said that it would almost start to sound really personal. Like when he would tell the story, you'd almost start to get the impression that maybe he was telling it in a really, really personal kind of way. So it did kind of, I think, leave a little bit of a seed of wonder within his students as to what his connection was, or maybe as an incarnate of, I don't know. But I did want to share that. So Vishvamitra was a little bit different than the other Septarishis. He was not born of the Septarishi class, so to speak. He was actually of some sort of heritage here, a king upon the earth plane, but really devoted and dedicated to his practice. And so he spent literally thousands of years practicing these practices. The longer he studied, obviously, the longer his longevity of life. A human, probably wouldn't have lived that long. So we can also start to get curious about this whole idea of the story within Vishvamitra of thousands of years of devotion and practice. And he started to become so advanced with his accumulation of energy that literally he was appointed a Septarishi along with all of these other rishis. So he had kind of a unique energy within that. And during part of his path of his practice, he started kind of a new thing that was on this path of his practice to do. And within that, the stipulation of it was to not have sex. He went off and he set off to go do his practice. Within this, he started building his energy bigger and bigger and bigger during this time. It was so like noticeable that these basically Indra, not the other Septarishis, but Indra, who is basically kind of a lord over the gods, uh, started to take notice of his massive accumulation of his energy and his power. And Indra started to get really, really jealous. Indra has a huge jealous energy to him. Um, Indra has many times even been associated with Enlil. Within this, Indra had huge jealousy about what Vishvamitra was up to and what he was doing. And so he devised a plan. And he basically got this beautiful woman. Now this wasn't just any beautiful woman. There's like this whole story of the Asuras and the Devas churning the ocean of milk with some serpent around a mountain, and of there these divine things were coming from it. And one of these divine things was this beautiful woman, and she was just incredible. Her name was Manaka, and she was just stunning and beautiful. Indra sent Manaka down to Vishvamitra where he was meditating, and he was in his stance of meditation, so he didn't take no notice of her. But after a while, he actually opened and within the statements, and I think the way that Sri Kaleshwar said it is he opened his third eye. So whatever that metaphor might mean, he basically allowed himself to take his vision from the Divine Mother and witness this beautiful woman. And as he saw this beautiful woman dancing there, he's kind of just decided, yeah, maybe 20 minutes won't make a difference. Maybe I can be with her for just a moment and that will be okay. Well, there was spells around this. There really was, because as he took his sights off of his mantras and his practice for a moment, he slept with this woman. And he was romping around with her and playing, and then he was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, I gotta stop. I gotta stop. I cannot be doing this. I have to go back to my practice with, thank you, you're beautiful. It was wonderful, but I gotta go. I have a practice and a dedication to do. Well, as he left, he was leaving, he was basically feeling like it was just like maybe 20 minutes that he'd been with her, maybe a couple hours at the most. And she looked at him and went, no, it's actually been 250 years that we've been here frolicking and making love with each other. And she's all like, "By the way, you have a grown daughter." Well, he became enraged and furious at this time. He realized immediately that he had basically been manipulated and like a spell cast. So if he thought it was like 20 minutes or 2 hours at the most, but it was really 250 years, I think we could start to go like, it looks like some sort of time manipulation or some sort of time dilation, something dimensional that really got played on him. So he literally got pulled away from his practice for 250 years of his practice time. He was so upset. And within this, he immediately realized. So it's interesting because Manak at that time, she was just like, "Oh, he's mad." Phew, and she took off. That was it. She took off. I think she really did, like him and enjoy her time with him, but in the end realized that, oh, I am not in a good space right now. I'm out of here. And within that, he went storming to the realm of the gods. So he went to the place of Indra and he got to these gates, and there were these guards at the gate, and the gates guardsmen looked at him and they said, "No, you can't come in." And Vishvamitra was furious. He says, "I am one of you. I am from this land. Let me in now." And they were like, "No." And they were like laughing at him because they were like, "You've lost all your power. You're not one of us anymore." Well, Vishvamitra at this time, he is literally yelling and screaming. And it's interesting because Sri Kalishwar said that was what he should have done. That in that moment, it wasn't about him going in a rage or losing his mind, but in that moment, recognizing that there is a command. So I think there's something for us to take from that because Sri Kalishwar said he should be angry. He should yell at them. He should act that way. And so I think there's something for us to even meditate on that very aspect, that when we are manipulated or tricked, that there is the right for us to yell at these manipulation forces and say, "No, I do not consent." Well, in short, they did not let him in. They did not let him in the gates. And so he turned around. Now, remember, he's trying to go into that Loka. From again our perspectives of Loka, even though it's a different dimension, it's many times also referred to as another planet where these gods were. So he turned around. He left that planet, that plane, that place where those gods were, and he left. So within this, he decided to go back and just build up his energy again. He had lost everything he'd built up. So he went back and started meditating for thousands of years again in order to start to build his energy again. And as he was doing this, he started to have these visions. He started to connect with these other aspects of the Divine Mother. And he actually connected to a completely different aspect of the mother, a completely almost, it's interesting here in the story because it's almost like he connected to a completely different mother in some ways, or a different aspect or dimension or dream of the mother. So within this, he created a whole new world, like a whole new creation. And in some ways, it's like all of this then begins to become Vishvamitra's new creation. So, in the form of him going through all of that turmoil and losing all of his power and having to build it up again, he actually finds the Gayatri. So, the Gayatri mantra is actually, he hears or he connects to this aspect of the Divine Mother that is outside of the matrix or a mother that Indra and his god beings that he's hanging out with are existing in. And in Indra's reality, there is the karmic cycles. It is the years and thousands of years of reincarnation and doing over and over and over again. Well, Vishvamitra hears within the womb of mother a different aspect of the mother, and it's the Gayatri mantra. And it is said within the phrases of the Gayatri mantra that there is more wisdom within just the Gayatri mantra and those lines of it than all four, I think, verses in the Rig Veda, or chapters, or sections within it. I'm not sure exactly how they're referred to, but within this, he connected to this. He found that sound and he connected to that matrix aspect of it and literally created a new creation. Within this creation, he created a brand new place that transcended any of those laws and bylaws and those multiplicities of incarnations and all of these things. In fact, he found basically the loophole outside of the bindings of these reincarnational lifetimes. So they're saying, that it's like when you meditate with the Gayatri mantra, you begin to hear her form, her sound. And within this, it begins to create the liberation and the freedom. The Gayatri mantra literally connects us to like the Loka. It's another realm. It's outside of this plane to where we can actually connect to a higher deity plane, if you will, that allows a direct link for that energy where we have direct connection to it, so we don't have to go through all these other loopholes from the old ways of, I believe it was again the four stances of the Vedas, actually, not maybe the Rig Veda, or it might all be the same thing and I might be mixing it up. But one of the things I love about this story is recognizing Vishvamitra was unique in his own way. First of all, he wasn't created like all the other rishis. He basically became a created rishi within his own self. He went through an entire journey of literally building up all of his power and then losing all of his power. And through that determination and that devotion, he literally reconnected to a new sound of the mother that, to me, like when I hear this, I'm going like, this is literally, he found the code behind the matrix for the door out that bypasses all the BS of all of these laws and intricacies and passed on karmas and debts and all of these things, and a direct link to an aspect of the mother that creates this ultimate freedom. So within this, I think this is very interesting that Vishvamitra is also connected to the womb chakra mantras, the Septarishi channels, the Sri yantra, and these very sacred palm leaf manuscripts, that as we start to understand that these wombs are worlds, and when we start to learn they're all a bit different, I think the story of Barbello gives us another perspective to start to look at some of these energies, so we can start to look at how there is these dreams that get created, and when we exist within them, there are ways out beyond to higher planes of consciousness. So this, I think, is very special as you contemplate the Septarishis, which are again the seven rishis, as you contemplate Vishvamitra in that connection to the Gayatri mantra, this really beautiful story that really is the success out of all this trial and tribulation to really actually find something that supersedes beyond all of the rigorous games that were played before. And it was almost like a destined journey from the divine for him to really find this new sound within the Divine Mother that actually bypasses, part of my language, all of BS. So within that, this is something very special just to contemplate as you work with a lot of these things we're talking about. But one of the things I just wanted to share is you start to work with the womb chakra. There's so much more to it. It's really unlocking our galactic history for us. We're not these little innocent beings, I feel, anymore that are just going like, oh, I'm reaching for the good or I'm reaching for the not good. I feel like we're starting to see the diversity within it. We're starting to see the mixed different races and the mixed different energies, such as the Nephilim and even the Jehovian lines with J9. And how are the indigo threes tied in with this? This is something really great for us to question, ask more. As you're doing your womb chakra clearing, as you're connecting with this, we're recognizing that on the highest divine levels, that we have the ability through the power of our womb, male or female, to really be able to give massive dreams into creation. This is a thought from all of this, right? We can give these massive dreams. We can be like the Septarishis in these enlightened times with these higher wisdoms. Well, what are the higher wisdoms for? And I love Sri Kalishwar's simplicity with all of that, to reconnect us again to the mother. I don't know if you guys have like picked it up from everything I talk about, but I'm in love with the divine mother. I hope this has brought some interesting questions for you. I honestly hope this presentation has made more questions than answers for you in order to give you more to think about and play with, as it has for me. So thank you guys. I'm just loving the comments in here. Thank you for letting me share this with you. I love you guys so much.